Hello and welcome to the France 24 interview. On today's programme, I have the pleasure of meeting with the former president of Chile, who is now the Under-Secretary General of the United Nations and the head of UN Women, the agency that was created a couple of years ago to oversee gender equality and the empowerment of women. Michelle Bachelet, thank you very much indeed for being our guest today.
Happy to be here.
First of all, you arrive in a particular context here in France after the election, the naming for the first time in European history of an entirely equal cabinet. 17 men and 17 women are now ministers in France. A big show was made of this by François Hollande. This is an important symbol, we were told. Does it matter? Will it change things? And how important are symbols?
Well, first of all, it matters, I would say, from different points of view. If I may say, as a former president, I think it's good when a candidate promises something and then when it's in office, does it. Because first of all, we're living in a world where people are many times very suspicious about politics. And I think it's good that politicians do what they promised. Second thing, I think it's a great start for gender equality. We need to do much more. And in my own experience, I mean, you can have fantastic women, but women in terms of being able to really, I would say, develop all the potential, they need role models. And it's so good to have the half of the cabinet women and the half men, because women in France, but also in other parts of the world, will be looking at that and thinking it is possible. And third, from my own experience, women ministers can be sometimes the best ministers. In my experience, Chile, they did evaluate many of my women ministers as the best ones. So it's also a great contribution to the country. So I think it's a great step. I really congratulate President Hollande for it.
Is there something, picking up on that third point you just made, is there something specific about the reasons why women seek power and what they do with power once they have it that mark them out as different from men?
Well, as usual, you cannot make a generalization. We have seen women in power that, if I would say, behave like in the typical male codes, but other women who really look to power like a mission in life. They want to change the world for the better. And what we see, for example, women in parliament or even in office, they usually focus a lot on, I would say, policies that put in the center the people and try to improve their lives. You see, when you have more women at the council level, at local levels, for example, or at parliament, but also at national level, what you see is that it flourishes all the social plans, education, health, and so on. Some people think that those are soft issues. I don't think they're soft issues. They're issues related to the betterment of people. But you can also have women in charge of labor and work and trying to find more jobs, opportunities, and so on. So I think women care and bring I would say, the perspective of half of the humanity. At least is almost 50% in humanity. The women are 3.5 billion people. So I think it brings a perspective that is complementary to men and can then be, I would say, reflected in a more comprehensive policies.
You mentioned the specific policies aimed at women in particular. There is, of course, a huge field here, the one that you're now interested in. Since 2 years now, you've been at the head of this reorganized UN agency to try and tackle these issues head on. When you look at the figures, you realize how much more there is to be done. One that we were speaking about a moment ago, more than half of all women, and up to about 70%, will have been the victims of some sort of violence over the course of their lives. It seems an astonishing figure.
It is astonishing, and it's astonishing because it's the more pervasive violation of human rights, and you see it all over the world in different levels. So we need to do much more. But also, if you look at other issues, and I think they're linked to the initial one, how many women we have in high-level position in the political arena. From 194 member states of the United Nations, we have only right now 18 head of state or head of governments, presidents or prime minister, less than 10%. If you look at parliament all over the world, less 19%. I mean, less than 1 every 5 parliamentarians. And when women are not empowered, when women are not relevant then, women is also in a worse position to confront situations like violence, domestic violence, but also violence in conflict or post-conflict countries. And second, women are not then in the transformation processes. They're not reshaping their society. We are losing a big potential. It's not only the right thing to do, it is the right thing to do, to have women in more important positions and have and the possibility of achieving their rights and opportunities. But it's also the smart thing to do. I mean, societies will be better, will be healthier, economies will be better.
One of the big areas that we've been talking about, of course, these last couple of years, the Arab world, its spring, which women have been key in a number of the countries that swept the old guard from power. The initial revolts, when you went out on the streets, there were many women there in Tahrir Square and in Tunis as well. And yet, it seems equally inevitable that they will be sidelined by power. We see it in Egypt, where a party holds another majority in parliament and is likely to see its candidate win the presidential election, who states that it doesn't believe women should be involved in politics. Is there any hope, do you think?
I've been there seven times since March last year, 4 times last year, 3 in Egypt, 1 in Tunisia, this year in Lebanon, Morocco, and Libya, and speaking with women. And I was also with the Tahrir Square girls. They were so disappointed because the message they heard when they went to the new parties that were organizing themselves was, "It's not your time now, girls." And we have seen that in the history. In the history of transformation, usually it's more a political transformation, an economic one, but not so often an immediate cultural transformation. So they said to him, I remember some friends from South Africa told me, they told them, go back to the kitchens now. We already have won our capacity of leading ourselves. So I think it happens, but that doesn't mean we should be not optimistic. I think it will take longer, and we need to continue supporting women's organizations, women to organize themselves. In Egypt, for example, the results of the election were very bad. Only 9 women elected and 2 appointed on over 400 and something members of parliament. And that's like 2%. It's very bad. Before it was 12% because of a quota. Now it's very bad. But having said that, women have organized themselves. They have developed a national charter with their demands. They have developed a national Egyptian association. So it will take a little bit longer. But those women who were brave enough to be there at the streets in every minute, in every moment that we saw them on the news, they will continue fighting, because I think they will continue working, organizing themselves to be actors of the new face of their society, of the transformation of their society. And I will think it will take time, but it's important we continue supporting their efforts.
How do you change minds? Because it is a social change that needs to take place in order that a political and an economic change can take place. How can an organization like UN Women make a difference?
Well, we work with different levels. We work with governments in terms of showing to them why it's so important to, if I may use the word, invest politically, socially, economically in women. But we work also to support women's capacities, women's organizations, women's leadership skills, but also women as economic actors. That's one thing. But I believe that it's so important to have role models. If I see in my own experience, I have asked myself, how come I became, all the things that happened to me, to become Minister of Health, then Minister of Defense, the first Minister of Defense in all the regions of the Americas, female, and then President of the Republic. And I think the important thing was to be visible, to show that, and in that people realized that women were capable of many things, and then people could consider you as a possible candidate to the presidency. That's why, again, I go back to the paritarian cabinet, because I think it's important for men and women to see that women can.
Now, you, of course, became the first female president of Chile, an extraordinary achievement which must have made you feel that things had changed, that boundaries had been broken, that the world had moved on. Are you surprised now in your new role, now that you're confronted to the daily reality, some of the figures we've been talking about over the course of this interview, of many women, specifically outside the developed world and their day-to-day existence? Are you surprised to find how much there is left to do?
I'm not surprised, because I think because I think that in the developing world, you see a lot of different things. You see challenges for women linked to poverty. I mean, women have to fight and deal every day to feed their families, to be able to produce, to go and fetch water, to collect firewood, to have energy to their homes. So there's a lot of things that should be solved through sustainable development. And I think Rio Plus 20 next month is a real opportunity in terms of facilitating women's lives so they can really do better. But on the other hand, understand that women are making decisions every day and that it has to be considered as essential in sustainable development. The other issue is cultural one, or in some places religious one. And what we as UN Women understand is we cannot work only with the ones who are convinced that women are important. We need particularly to work in those places where women are seen as citizens of second class. And we see this in different aspects. For example, in conflict and post-conflict countries, you see women who have been victims of gender-based violence, of rape. And when you talk to the soldiers, they said, but I was raised with the idea that women values nothing. So we need to work, but again, we need to ensure that to happen, not only a good speech, but to ensure that women are relevant and can be strong constituencies in terms of political participation, in terms of economic activities, and so on. So we work on all those fields, trying to support women to improve their economic autonomy, to improve their participation in life, in places where decisions are made. I think that's crucial. But also, we need to ensure education for girls, and we need to ensure in education that tackles stereotypes. We have to do so many things. So we are working not only UN Women, the whole UN system, and with partners like the OECD, the World Bank, IMF, all the international organizations to see how we can advance and progress on gender equality and women's empowerment.
Michelle Bachelet, thank you very much indeed for having been our guest today. That brings us to the end of today's interview. We'll be back, though, very soon with another.